critique of past philosophers, the personal confession of its author, a kind of unintended, unwitting memoir. Our thinking is guided by our instincts. Most recognise that our philosophy has preserving properties that help us live. Philosophers desire to improve their values and impose their values upon others, the most spiritual form of the world of power. They want their ideas to shape and rule thinking, and in turn control and exploit. They are expressing their will to power. We must go forward, advance to something new. Criticism of Kant's attempts to demonstrate the truth of synthetic a priori judgments. Physics, only human interpretation, no explanation really. Concepts of immediate certainties and absolute knowledge. I think assumptions impossible to prove, and willing involves a multiplicity of feelings, commanding and expecting obedience. The bewitchment of language. First philosophical prejudice, the will to truth. We should ask why philosophers have desire for truth, not what is truth. Should pay more attention to appearance, to the will to illusion, to egoism, and to desire. Second philosophical prejudice, faith in antithetical values. We need to think in terms of the antithetical dualisms, and we tend to think in terms of the antithetical dualisms, e.g. faith, falsehood, good, evil. Plato has made us think in terms of physical and spiritual worlds. An error. We only see a partial view of the way things are. Apparent opposites derive from the same source, causally related. Philosophy is determined by the language of the person that credits it. Differences in philosophical thought between different culture groups. Ideas are shaped by the available words we have. Cause and effect are fictitious concepts. They are man-made and explain nothing, in accordance to Hume's idea. There are neither free or unfree worlds, only strong and weak worlds. Both who support libertarianism and determinism are deluded. Rejecting God for the laws of nature is equally delusionary, interpretation which cannot be justified. Wanting to travel beyond morality, and in fact crush the concept from our thinking altogether, we find reality through psychology. The new philosopher and his socio-intellectual status. There is more value placed after every question placed after your favourite Oh, fuck's sake. Nietzsche's critique of past philosophers. The personal confession of its author, a kind of unwitting memoir. Our thinking is guided by our instincts. Most recognise that our philosophy has preserving properties that help us live. Philosophers desire to impose their values upon others, the most spiritual form of the world of power. They want their ideas to shape and rule thinking, in turn control and exploit. They are expressing their will to power. We must go forward, advance to something new. He criticises Kant for attempts to try and demonstrate truth in synthetic a priori judgments. Physics is only human interpretation and no explanation of reality, just a description. Concepts of immediate certainties and absolute knowledge are flawed. I think creates assertions that are possible to prove. Willing involves a multiplicity of feelings, commanding and expecting obedience. Which truth and interpretation. The first philosophical prejudice, the will to truth. We should ask why philosophers have a desire for truth, not what is truth. We should pay more attention to appearance, to the will to illusion, to egoism and to desire. The second philosophical prejudice, faith in antithetical values. We tend to think in terms of antithetical dualisms, e.g. truth, falsehood, good, evil. Plato made us think in terms of physical and spiritual worlds. An error. We only see partial view of things where they are. Apparent opposites derive from the same source, and their causes are related. Philosophy is determined by language and by the person that creates it. Differences in philosophical thought between different culture groups. Ideas are shaped by the available words we have. Cause and effect are fictitious concepts. They are man-made and explain nothing, in accordance to Hume's idea of causal inference. There are neither free or unfree worlds, only strong and weak worlds. Both who support libertarianism and determinism are deluded. Rejecting God for the laws of nature is equally illusory, interpretation which cannot be justified. We need to travel beyond morality and in fact crush the concept from our thinking altogether. We find reality through psychology. The new philosopher and his socio-intellectual status. There is more value in every little question mark placed after your favourite words and favourite theories, and occasionally after yourselves, than in all your solemn, smart answers. A true philosopher must not look beyond, must look beyond and detach themselves from the world of falsified simplifications that filters development of human thought and culture. They must question their own values instead of becoming martyr for them. They are actually defending their prejudices. I should have a craving for solitude, but will need to interact with and observe others. Every superior human being desires to set themselves apart from the crowd. Independence is something only strong-willed people have. Places themselves in danger of solitude deliberately. Exoteric viewpoint. True philosophy, most people are not capable of. Observing things from outside you, from above you and beyond. Tragedy ceases to be tragic, and pity and praise are inappropriate. Nature just happens, and we with no guide or goal in mind. There is no inherent meaning or purpose, and using rules and norms to reach is bizarre, like using the rules of a child's game. Socio-intellectual status, no social rules or values, not understood by common society, funny, odd, strange, and not comprehending. A living thing desires above all to vent its strength. Life as such is the will to power. Self-preservation is only one of the indirect and most frequent consequences of it. The will to power is the only principle that we can be used to explain causation in the organic, inorganic, and conscious realms. That which causes a plant to grow and spread its seeds, or that which causes a wild animal to become the leader of its pack. That which causes a human to devise philosophy, to express its personal ideals upon others. The most spiritual form of the will to power. Also dominates the inanimate world of physical atoms. Instead of using science to explain our wills and drives, we should use our wills and drives to explain science, as we have experience of our wills and drives, and scientific laws are just man-made creations. Physical acts and instinctual life are cause and effect. Scientific interpretation of one will acting over another. The process of digestion as the different wills of organic matter struggle to break things down and not be broken down. Darwin's evolutionary theory is only one partial explanation, but the will to power explains striving for complexity, diversity, multiplicity, and creativity in nature. The highest type of human was not always the one to cope with his environment. Darwinism allows for the mediocre to survive, but the will to power explains that the reach for higher and higher goals. It's an account of a history of moral systems. But it's hard to preach this morality for the mediocre. It can never admit to itself what it is and what it wants. It has talk of proportion and dignity and duty and brotherly love. It will not find it easy to hide this irony. Nietzsche examines the historical origins of moral codes and values of genealogy, masked morality, a higher and noble cultures. Predatory humans aligned to the world of power dominated the weak world, forming the aristocratic class and natural hierarchy, found in ancient Greece and Rome. It kept us strong and healthy by constant challenging conditions of wars and revolution. No tolerance for the weak, who were used as slaves for the means to an end. Decadence forms. Life becomes easy. Attachment and punishment are less necessary. Individual strength is now treated with from within the culture, and mediocrity in the average majority is promoted. A decline into the herd mentality. The fall of Roman Empire. Slave morality. A Jewish slave revolt. Priests resented the aristocrats for affirming their will to power through natural desires. Priests then expressed their will to power through teaching the slave classes that the values of power, instincts and desires of the aristocrats was evil, thus making nobles inferior to them. Common people valued these teachings as it gave their lives and suffering meaning, a positive value to mask their resentment for the aristocratic classes. The ascetic ideal. It's good to have self-discipline, denying your will to power, sacrificing instincts and desires, sublimating their will to power to overcome their resentment for aristocracy. It allows a weak-willed person to exert their will to power over themselves, to give them a sense of satisfaction. And the notion of superiority, the new philosopher, a higher type of man, does not fit with society, does not act on the conditions most beneficial for their survival, the mediocre norms. They do not express themselves better through the aesthetic ideal. They are aligned to the world of power. They do not care for popularity. They are not serving the common good. That which is common has ever but little value. Only the superior minority will have the strength to achieve the real philosophy. They will create new values, overcome the aesthetic ideal, and disguise the truth. The new philosopher does not need to obey. He is a commander and a lawgiver. Move beyond good and evil, whilst aligned to the world of power. Recognise the danger of truth. Values are not based on falsehood. The strength of a person's spirit would then be measured by how much truth he could tolerate, or more precisely, to what extent he needs to have it deluded, digested, sweetened, muted, and falsified. The new philosopher must overcome affection for individuals. Every person is a prison. Allegiance to a fatherland, patriotism and jingoism, misinterpretation of Hitler and Nazism, pity, discoveries of science, detachment itself, danger of the flyer. Our own virtues could become vices. Self-denial and sacrifice, the suicidal reason, demanding sacrifice of freedom, pride, spiritual self-confidence. It has meant subjugation and self-desertion, self-mutilation. Origins. Religion has always been a reflection of society's values at a time. The Judeo-Christian slave revolt despised the exhibition of natural instincts in aristocratic classes. God is the opposite of human nature. Denying your will, religious neurosis, solitude, fasting and sexual abstinence, self-denial and denying of your will, admires a saint's use of the word to power over himself and gains respect, but not the direction, making himself less than he could be. Religion demands a constant sacrifice, the ladder of religious cruelty. Past, prized possessions and people, perhaps even the ones they loved best. Asceticism, the instincts and desires. Meaning, God is dead, sacrificed for gravity, fate and nothingness. A critique of modern ideas, the lawfulness of nature, a naive humanitarian concoction, a contortion of meaning that allows you to succeed in accommodating the democratic instincts of the modern soul. Modern ideas of people who claim to be enlightened or atheist when the foundational values are products of religion. Equality, herd instinct. To value the mediocre, a product of Christian religious belief. Democracy, human beings are clearly not equal. Morality that opposes suffering. Suffering is the origin of true greatness. Pity just creates more suffering for those who have been pitied and for the person who pities them. A hard work ethic destroys time for reflection. Does not merit those who do not properly consider religion. Humanist and religion with a different name. Scientism does not explain, just describes. Senses must be treated with caution. Empiricism and our senses can be led by prejudice of our values and instincts. Science is not unconditional or objective. It is only one perspective and merely a tool. By means of which the new philosopher takes a vivisecting knife to the breast of the virtues of that age. To discover the knowledge of a new human greatness, a new untrodden path to human aggrandizement. Masks for the new philosopher to use to fit into society. The new philosopher will guide beyond both. The first skeptic, negative, promotes caution, disinterest, a lack of passion, and cannot make definite decisions. They doubt and have a lack of self-belief. This is the paralysis of will. Second skeptic, positive, suspicious of easy answers, looks deeper, and not a result of fear. Frederick the Great analogy desires not to settle but discover and conquer new things. Also employ criticism. Critics seek to analyse and understand particular areas of knowledge, looking for underlying principles of consistency. Nobility. The modern, the ideal form of nobility is a new philosopher. Every previous high culture on earth began with some form of people who still had the nature that was natural, who were barbarians, predatory humans. These people exercised their will to power over others and who were weak and overcame them. The noble caste was always a barbarian caste. The strong will to power, the aristocrats. The aristocrats stand on top of the hierarchy. The minority, they exercise their will to power above the weaker world, and the slave class is at the bottom. Society is a framework from which the aristocracy can grow. Only aristocratic classes succeed in elevating human beings to overcome themselves. Superior intelligence, more complete human beings. The weaker willed are to be exploited, oppressed, or diminished. They become corrupted, lose their healthy status, may become functions of community. People are not of equal value. Refrain from injury, absurding, or exploiting one another, life-denying. The will to power is the original fact of all history. Qualities. Mastered himself. His project and work is an expression of his will to power. It's difficult to understand vanity. He's solitary, independent, uses others as a means to an end, driven by work, seeks responsibility, essentially healthy, wills his life unconditionally, reveres himself and strives for his own values, understands the importance of history and its influence. He may indulge in artistic and creative work. He's indifferent to others. His strong use of sense of self-worth. His responsibility for the whole human race. He's respectful for other people and noble people. They do not look up to anything or anyone, to anyone or anything. They use suffering to become greater still. This represents Nietzsche's use of genealogy. Philosophy must be informed. We have to uncover the historical origin of our ideas and their development by studying history, psychology, and then applying interpretation. The old traditional ways of philosophy fail. The new philosopher will explicitly set out to prescribe his motives to the world. Responses. Nietzsche uses selective accounts of history. There is more to them than just what he points out. Nietzsche response. Actually read and relied on the best historical scholarship of his time, and did not feel the need to include vast amounts of detail. The genetic fallacy cannot be applied to his accounts, as their philosophy requires the use of origins. He uses speculative genealogical stories. Evidence is too vague, unverifiable, and could not be proven to be correct, unfalsifiable and meaningless. Nietzsche response. What do you think about Christian values in this light? Possible response. Genealogy does not have to be used like this. It can be used to justify what it applies to. He asserts claims, no philosophical argument. Nietzsche response. Does not value philosophical argument. Not possible to argue for objective truth. Because they include motives and wills, they are less distorted perspective of the truth. He selectively chosen certain periods of history. Many societies and cultures do not fit this model, e.g. tribal groups or women of the dominant sex. Nietzsche's response. The will to power can always be applied. He uses examples that provided good. He used examples that provide good examples. Genetic fallacy. Just because you can explain the origin of truth doesn't mean it isn't true. Roots in psychology do not make them untrue. Drugs and artist example. Nietzsche response. If they do not lie in our prejudices and instincts, how can we justify them as true? How can we nominate one over the other, and how can we know which to believe? Paradox. Perspectivism cannot, in itself, be objectively true. Nietzsche response. Some perspectives are more distorted than others. They are false and to claim awareness of objective truth, are less distorted as awareness of a perspective. The will to power is in danger of becoming dogma. Everything is the will to power seems a bit to contradict perspectivism. A system of Plato or Kant that Nietzsche mocked. Nietzsche in response, he is just claiming that life is in a certain way, empirically. Ad hominem attacks, not valid philosophical arguments. Attacking the philosopher does not debunk his theory. He does not judge the arguments on his merits, on their merits. Nietzsche's response. Knowing the instinctive motives, prejudices, and drives behind a theory mean it is self-interested and not interested in objective truth. The philosopher is an author of his work, and his wishful thinking shines through. Illegitimately arguing from facts to values, from is to ought. Life is exploitation. We ought to do better. Nietzsche in response. We cannot escape the influence of our will to power. Embrace the will to power to affirm life. It is not an ought statement. You can do no other than live life as exploitation. Possible response. Life is exploitation. It is more trivial, therefore we should be able to judge that ideas are beyond good and evil on moral ground. Anything can be done in the name of the will to power. It could justify anything morally abundant. It is a price worth paying for the benefit of the human race as a whole. No justification for saying religion is a suicidal reason. Arguments for rational faith. Nietzsche responds, belief beyond experience is not reasonable, just towards power and fear. And his critique of religion is one-sided, and Nietzsche overlooks the joy and glory of religion.